My name is Vilde, and I work as a research assistant at Consumption Research Norway. And I will continue in the line of face masks. And in this presentation, which I have written with my colleague Ingunn Gimsa Klepp, who presented earlier today, I will reflect upon the different recommendations and use of face masks during the COVID-19 pandemic by specifically looking at Norway and the very low use of face masks and how the face mask can be understood as a garment with different connotations and meanings. So if we look at the available research on the effect of various infection control measures, they are somewhat pointing in the same direction. So why are attitudes towards face masks so different? And I will try to add to this debate by seeing the face mask as a garment and not as a medical device. I will also connect the reluctance to face masks to laws that prohibit covering the face for religious garments, as this is the case for many of the countries that now recommend using masks. So clothing that covers the face can have many functions, and balaclavas and cold weather masks are used for protection against the cold. Scarves and shawls are used in desert areas to protect the face against sand and wind. Medieval plague masks and modern face masks are used for protection against disease and infection. But clothing can also be used to protect the body from the gaze of others. This is an important function in many religions, but there is also the function of protecting other people from unpleasant sights, as in the case of an eye patch covering a missing eye. But garments can be developed for one purpose and used for something completely different, as in the case of the balaclava, a knitted hat that covers the head and neck, which has been used by, for example, bank robbers. And in connection with the COVID, we have seen many different garments used for infection control purposes, from snoods and scarves to surgical face masks, diving masks, and even gas masks. So Norway. Norway has had very little use of face masks in general, and during the pandemic, it has not increased at all. So the health authorities do not recommend using masks, arguing that there is no scientific basis for recommending a general use of face masks. And instead, they recommend keeping distance to other people in public and to avoid places where many people are gathered. So I suppose like many other countries have not only recommended face masks, but made them even mandatory in situations and locations where many people meet, such as public transport. But a part of the reason why Norway has such a low use of masks can be due to the population density, which is very low, and leads to little contact with other people in public spaces, places, and during the pandemic, as you can see on the picture here, over half of the seats in public transport were made unusable. So technically, people traveling on public transport are able to keep distance. However, the intention with the unusable seats has also led to more people standing close together. I see they don't want to use the seats that cannot be used, but they still want to go on the tube, even if there is too many people. So a recent survey on face masks in Norway show that almost 1/3 were positive to wearing face masks, but over 40% were negative. And very few Norwegians are currently wearing face masks in public. However, there have been exceptions, like the recent demonstrations triggered by the events in Minneapolis. So several peaceful demonstrations took place in Norway last Friday, actually. And it was quite visible that a lot more people wore masks during these demonstrations. And technically, these gathering of crowds goes against the restrictions in Norway. And the face masks in this situation can be seen as a way to be responsible in a very crowded public space where people know that this is not what the authorities want you to do, but they still have the right to demonstrate. So a possible reason contributing to the low everyday use of face masks in Norway is connected to Western prohibitions and unease related to the covering of faces in public. So there is no doubt that the burqa and niqab have given rise to more debate than any other face covering garment in recent years. And France was among the first countries to introduce comprehensive legislation in 2004, which was extended in 2011. And this ban applies to beaches, schools, theaters, public transport, and industry. And in 2018, Norway banned garments that cover the face to be used in schools and public institutions. And this ban applies for all garments that cover the face and will apply to balaclava and niqab, but not hats and hijabs. So while the use of face masks in Southeast Asia have been thoroughly studied, there has been very little research on the corresponding reluctance to use masks in Western countries. However, I assume that there will be a lot more studies now because this research was mainly done before the pandemic really started. So there are some descriptions earlier that Asians have felt bullied or affected by the burqa ban when they're traveling. And a study from the US done before the pandemic on barriers to wearing face masks found that despite the fact that a large majority of the informants believed that they could protect themselves and others by wearing a mask, they were not willing to use face masks. And in light of the recent events, this latter finding is very relevant in terms of racial discriminations, as Americans of color, particularly men, have shared their fears of wearing face masks in public and being mistaken for criminals. So to sum up, the meaning and interpretation of a garment is rooted in culture and different clothing practices. So the different use, recommendations, and laws for wearing masks is likely more reliant on cultural than scientific evidence. Many European countries, including Norway, have statutory restrictions in place on the use of garments that cover parts of the face. So while Eastern Asia faced a pandemic with a population used to wearing face masks and an industry dimension to supply them in large numbers, Norway faced the pandemic with a very skeptical attitude, a very small to non-existent textile industry, and little experience of wearing face masks as part of everyday routine. So just like face masks can consist of many layers of textiles, garments can carry many layers of meaning. Thank you.
Vilde, thank you so much for your presentation or for this, Norwegian kind of point of view on mask wearing. Do we have comments or questions? Yes, actually, there are a couple of comments from Ellison Matthews David. So she, yes, she speaks about robberies and wearing balaclavas. She was able to find quite a lot of them in archives. And also the same Islamophobic ban against facial covering for public servants, including school teachers, has recently been put in place in Quebec with Bill 21, yes. But face masks for COVID are fine. And yes, Hazel Clark says, thank you, important emphasis on the cultural context, which also parallels Patricia's points. So we have quite a lot of written comments. People, yes, colleagues decided to go into this box for comments rather than commenting live.